Hey, welcome to Wednesday on Golden State Boulevard. And feel free to ignore my boyfriend tapping away in the background at Guild Wars. This week's topic is pride, specifically with regards to the LGBT community. I feel like a failure in this regard because I have a lot of stuff from Pride and to do with Pride, but alas, I have brought absolutely none of it with me to Germany. I don't know how that happened. So what I was able to do is I found that I did bring these two pins from my university. One of them, this one, says Rethink Gender and is related to the Spectrum Center at my university, which is like the hub of LGBT student affairs. And this one, the big M, stands for University of Michigan, and it is clearly a rainbow button that I got at this thing we have called Gays Craze, which is equivalent, I guess you could say, to a sort of a Pride event. My opinion personally on the concept of pride is a little bit double-weighted, I guess you could say. On the one hand, I do have quite a lot of pride. I go to loads of LGBT events. I go to LGBT night, gay night at the local club. Most of my friends fall into the LGBT spectrum. And I make videos about being bigendered, about being a member of the gender nonconforming community. So clearly, I do feel quite a bit of pride about how far I've personally come of my community, and I'm very close with a lot of people in my community. That being said, and while I do really support the idea of having pride parades, I'm not one of the people who think that it sends a bad message to straight people. I think that half-naked men, drag queens, big rainbows, and parades and things like that are a big part of the gay culture, at least in America. I can't really speak for anywhere else. So I really don't think that there's anything wrong with that, and I don't really see why anybody should feel the need to censor that on account of giving the straight community the wrong impression. I think that if that's what they think being gay is about, then they're not very open-minded to begin with. However, I do think, and I have had experience with this at my university, that having too much pride, which I do think you can have, leads to trouble. It leads to marginalization, it leads to exclusivity, and certainly at my university, although we do have a relatively big presence on campus, it leads to clickiness. And what I mean by that is, as I mentioned, me personally, I'm completely guilty of this. Almost all of my friends, and certainly all of my close friends, are heavily involved in the LGBT community, are mostly falling into those categories. And I think that's to my detriment. And I think that that is to the detriment of the gay community to potentially come across, like many other marginalized groups, as exclusive, as separate. I don't think that we should, as a community, take our pride to the level of saying that we are separate from everybody else. I guess the way I would describe the exclusivity that I'm talking about is not so much that there's a sign outside of like gay clubs. It's not like they're saying straight people aren't allowed. Most of the time people will put up a sign or an extra disclaimer saying people of all identities are included and are welcome. But I think that when you actually go into these groups and things, I've certainly seen allies be excluded, in a sense, and be made to feel less than. And I don't feel like it's the duty of the LGBT community to actively make straight people feel comfortable at all times, when certainly straight people as a whole have excluded and marginalized and actually harmed the LGBT community. But I do think that it does not behoove the LGBT community to actively or even unintentionally make their allies, our allies, feel like they are less than somehow when they're in LGBT spaces. Because it is these allies, who are the majority in America, who are going to be pivotal to getting laws passed that we need passed. We can't get those things passed on our own. And so, not to say we should go out of our way to make our allies feel comfortable and inform them and be some sort of a dictionary or a map or a source of information inherently. I do think that it is detrimental to make them feel uncomfortable. We had an incident at my university, and I'm not going to name names, and I'm certainly not going to mention the organization or anything, because this is not what they stand for. This was just an isolated incident. But there was a girl who was an ally in one of our groups who wanted to run for a position, and it was decided by the people in charge that that would not be a good idea since she was not LGBT. And so they actively made a decision to discriminate against her for being straight. And I thought that that was mind-blowing. Nobody was more involved with or more embodying of what it means to be in that community than this girl. She's more active than some people who identify as LGBT in the community, and certainly the perfect idea of what an ally is supposed to be. So for her to be actively discriminated against shocked me. And it did make me realize and look more into this idea of self-segregation by the LGBT community. Now, I'm not talking about everybody, certainly, and I'm not even saying that most people are like that. Most gay people that I know, myself included, we have straight friends. We certainly have nothing against straight people or against cis people. It's just that I think that there's this tendency for birds of a feather to flock together, and that as people, and people in general should do this, people should make an effort to get to know people that don't necessarily have their shared background, that don't necessarily have their shared experiences, to be a more well-rounded person. That is how tolerance comes about. And tolerance and respect and understanding are the things that are going to make our cultural climate more savory. And that does include, whether it's fair or not, being open to being very inclusive and even almost searching out allies. So yes, that's sort of my two sides of that issue type thing. But I do think that pride events and wearing, the buttons, the t-shirts, going to the clubs and things, that's so much fun. And if you've never been, totally go, because it's really worth it. You meet so many amazing people. The spectacles are awesome. Getting to see everybody all dressed up and happy and getting to wave your rainbow flag around is really, really fun, especially if you're not usually in an environment that includes or has a lot of LGBT identifying people. So that's what I have to say about Pride, and until you guys catch me next Wednesday, be happy, be safe, and take care of yourselves, alright? Peace out.